Here we are, rocking to that jamming music. Yes, keeping us awake at this late hour. And it's another episode of that GD show. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. You might notice that my dear friend and co-host Genevieve is not with us tonight. And filling in for her is Secular Rarity.
Woo! I'm just thrilled to be here, man. You know I love you to death, Dave. And it is just great to be talking with John tonight. It is so cool to have him on. And yeah, I think we're gonna have fun. We've got a lot to talk about. We're gonna go pretty hard, John. I don't know if you're ready for this. You're gonna be in the hot seat, man. We're gonna really dig into the arguments. So we'll have fun.
Well, thank you for being here, our guest, John W. Loftus. Good to have you with us, brother.
It's great to be here. It's wonderful. I've already met you and talked with you about 10, 15 minutes. We've had a lot of laughs. I like that. Let's do some more.
Right? Yeah, I almost didn't recognize you on screen here. I don't think I've ever seen you without your hat on, or one of your hats. So there we go. There we go.
Nice.
He's always got a nice variety of hats.
I do. I like them. They got a little shadow up there, but yeah.
Oh, it's good. Yeah, we got to meet in person back last year. Gosh, no, it was this year in at the Better Conference in Fort Wayne.
October, I believe. Yeah.
October. Yeah, it was a fun time, and got to chat with you a little bit. That was nice. We were just talking backstage about conferences coming up next year, and so hopefully I get to see you at some more of those, John.
Wonderful. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah. Anyway, it's good to be here again. And like I always like to say, if you are new to this channel, please like and subscribe and let us know that you like what we do. And if you want to support our work, we'd love for you to become a Patreon. We give you some behind the scenes stuff to our patrons, some connections there that we like to honor you guys for supporting us. So thank you for those who do. We won't be taking calls tonight. We normally do, but we've got an issue with our production. So if you have questions or comments, as you see on the screen there, send them through the super chats to get first priority. And then in the chat room, you can just let us know what's on your mind. If you want to have a question for John or a question in general, just throw it out there and we'll try to get to it. As always, Greg Markowski with that 1999 super chat. Thank you, brother. SR is almost as great as Genevieve.
That's probably one of the nicest things anybody's ever said to me. So I will take that. That's
yeah. That's not bad coming from Greg there. But Genevieve, no one can replace Genevieve.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Yeah, being almost as great means that there's a chance.
Absolutely. So John, what are you up to these days? I told you backstage that you were one of the first. One of your books. You're a prolific author. You've written quite a few books since your exit from Christianity. But I want to dive into a little bit more of your story. Your faith, your apostasy, and we all know that you left Christianity because you wanted to sin more. But we're going to talk about what kinds of sins you wanted to do. That's what we're going to get into tonight. But I was looking through your stuff and some of your books, and Amazon reminded me that I ordered one of your books in 2013, not long after. And I don't have a firm timeline on my deconstruction. I don't know that there's not a date I can point to on the calendar and say at that date I deconverted. I went from being a Christian to an atheist. I don't have that kind of clarity about that. I mean, others may, but I just don't. But I know it was around 2011 or so that I kind of really ended up my questioning and came to the conclusion I didn't believe any of it. And so in the next few years, I started looking for content that would help me understand what I'd gone through. And your book was one of those, Why I Became an Atheist. So I guess let's start there. Why did you become an atheist? Tell us about your faith journey and what caused that to change all those years ago.
Well, again, it's nice to be here and to talk with people. How many people do you have who might be watching, either live or
we usually have 75 or 80 folks on the live broadcast at any given time, and then over the course of the next week or two, there are usually about 1,000 views or sometimes more.
8,000 people. Well, if you haven't met me or known of me yet, but I converted from Catholicism at about the age of 17 or 18. It's kind of vague for me. I think it was 17. And I was raised in Catholic church, had parochial school. I was confirmed. And then I became a juvenile delinquent,
Yeah.
I was. And I had a dramatic conversion. Maybe my life is a little bit of drama. I wish it weren't so, but.
So you like, when you say juvenile delinquent, like you got on drugs and stuff, or sex, drugs, rock and roll, all that stuff?
Weed, rock and roll.
Yeah. Hippie. You were a hippie, man.
Alcohol. I was. And then, I had a dramatic conversion to Jesus, and all of a sudden, he meant everything to me. This thing in my mind meant everything to me. And I found it interesting looking back. I was talking to someone yesterday about this. I said, I don't understand why people believe this stuff and they don't throw their whole lives into it.
Exactly.
I mean, if it were true.
If it's true, man, you should give everything. You should leave everything and follow Jesus. I mean, right?
Well, yeah, what we read that we're supposed to do that in the gospel, of course, but
right.
I mean, really do that. I mean, like, if people were actually going to hell, you'd be knocking on their door in the middle of the night and saying,
absolutely,
Jesus saves, And so I wanted to know everything about this newfound faith I had. And, I read the Bible through 7 times, and I began reading it, and I must have read it 3 times that year, all the way through. Not like a devotional thing that says, okay, here's my devotion for today. And then,
Oh, no, serious. Serious searching of the word.
But true.
Yeah.
And, I'd hitchhike for people to pick me up so I could tell them about Jesus. I mean, I'm a passionate person,
Oh, my God, Don, we were just alike, dude.
You too?
Same story. Oh, God, I hitchhiked up and down the roads. I gave cars away because I felt like God was telling me to. And so then I said, yes, I'll just hitchhike and I'll have this captive audience for however many miles until they threw me out.
That's right. I'd bring Bibles and tracts and stuff like that. And sometimes, I had success, and at least to my mind. And so then people said, well, you ought to go to Bible college, where's that? So then I was informed that there's one a few hours away, Great Lakes Christian College. I went there and I graduated 4 years later. And then they said, well, you got to be a minister. And somehow, for some reason, I was praying and I felt like God's calling me to be a minister. Where'd that come from? I know where it came from now, of course, my head, my head kept talking to me, and I thought it was real. I got to be a minister. So I got a ministry, a youth ministry. I actually loved those 2.5 years that I was with them and the kids, and still, I don't see them much anymore. I did go back and have a good dinner with a couple, 3 of them, and it was nice, and they listened to me and my story, and they still respect me. But then I felt calling to go for more college, so I went to Lincoln Christian Seminary, and I graduated in 3 years with a MA and a THM, or a MA and a MDiv, Master of Theology, Master of Arts, and Master of Divinity.
Wow.
And then I went into ministry for 4 years, and while I was there, I studied at Marquette University in a PhD program for theology and philosophy and ethics. So, I mean, I really got into it. I mean, I really was interested in it. And,
you were serious. Yeah, you were serious. What kind of church? What kind of
Christian church, Church of Christ.
Church of Christ.
The distinctive feature about them is they claim they're not a denomination.
Well, yeah, right.
Sure.
Were you
whatever.
in the
we're the real church.
Well, you were in the ones. There was always this joke we heard back, when I was a Christian. You die and you go to heaven, and St. Peter's walking you around, and he's showing you this group over here and this mansion, and there's that, and then these big, tall walls you walk by, and he goes, shh, don't say anything. That's where the Church of Christ are. They think they think they're the only ones here.
Yeah. You heard of us before. So I was there, and my dad got cancer, and I was worn out from all this education, and so I took a ministry closer to home in Angola, Indiana, about an hour north of Fort Wayne, where I was born and raised. And I was able to see him through till he passed away, passed into the other unconscious realm. Mm-hmm. And so I fully intended to go back and finish my PhD, but I just, life, had other plans.
life got in the way of the best laid plans, right?
Yeah, I know. So that's education ministry. As a minister, a senior minister, a youth minister, and then the thing about higher education, and that's what I try to do, is I try to communicate to people in the pew and the educated people in the pew and college students. That's the people that might be ripe for reevaluating their faith, especially the college students, especially because they're out on their own and they can think for themselves. They don't have parents all over looking on them, right, most of the time, except in their conscience, area. Yeah. And so I want to give them information, and the reason why I think it may not do any good for them initially, but if they suffer through a crisis, then it can. All of a sudden, when they're evaluating their faith, they've got the information, and somehow I remember, what about this? And and mainly, I think there's two issues. The last two books, one is about miracles, and something happened, and they look for a miracle, and it never happens. Just doesn't happen. Year after year, it never comes true. Which way am I going?
What's the name of the book there? The Case Against Miracles?
Case Against Miracles. That's
right.
I can't. Oh, I have to cover my face to do that.
There you go. Yeah. I know you hate to cover your face. I know you hate to cover your face. I know. That's awful.
So, a lot of times you can't pinpoint one specific reason why people leave their faith. I know that, but a lot of times they didn't get their miracle that they wanted, or an answer to the prayer that it was necessary to their well-being. So so I wrote a book on it's an anthology with other authors. Okay. And the other one is suffering. It goes hand in hand. Yeah. Goes hand in hand with the miracles, and so those are the last two books I put out, and those are the kind of things, those are the kind of issues, that's the kind of information that if I can get people to look at, then during a crisis, it might help them reevaluate things and embrace a reality-based life rather than a fantasy-based life. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's what I've been doing, and I like to bring it down where people can understand. I remember when I first started teaching college classes. My very first class I taught for the College of Lake County in Grace Lake, Illinois, and it was a philosophy class, and I lost half my class in a few weeks, 3-4 weeks. They couldn't understand me. I know. You listen to me now, you say, "Well, he's easy, this guy." No, I just came out of a PhD program, and I thought my career was over. I thought this is it. I can't keep, half a class. And the chairman of the program, he said, "Nah, That happens a lot.
When you say you lost them, you mean they just weren't able to keep up with what you were saying?
No, they said they didn't understand me. That was the main thing. They didn't understand. Philosophy sometimes they're not really. I mean, some of these words aren't things you use in normal everyday conversation, and so apart from like bringing in a dictionary or writing down, so I lost them, and well now. See how I'm talking now. I use simple words, and now they think, well, he's uninformed. I swear they do.
You can't win either way.
No, that's really true. And I've always heard a thing that you haven't taught someone and you haven't taught someone anything until they've learned it. So it doesn't do any good to just put information out if the person is not able to understand what you're saying, or at least be able to dialogue about it. Then you haven't gained anything.
So I put the information out, hopefully that maybe that might help in a crisis. Have
you gotten some feedback on that? I mean, you've got you've got a lot of loyal readers that have followed you a lot of years. So what kind of feedback have you gotten from the miracles and the other book?
They're just 2019 for the miracles book and 2021 for the suffering book. I love it. People love it. I don't know that it's changed any minds yet, though. I mean, like there are people who love it. Like there was a philosophy professor in Brazil that contacted me and said, I just absolutely loved it. So I hope he's teaching it, endorsing it, and things like that.
That's right.
And on the other hand, you get people, just general people in the pews or educated people who say that they love something. They want to ask me a question. They sometimes they want to debate me with things, and I want to do that with people who first read my books. And sometimes someone will say, well, I want to debate you about miracles. I'm sorry to ask you this. I think people might think I'm peddling books or something, but have you read my book on miracles or suffering or something? And no, well, I'm probably already answered your question if you read it. Why don't you read it first?
They don't want to, right? Yeah.
And I'd like to give my books out for free. I would love to have, something over my shoulder like Santa Claus and say, all right, a book. I wish I could. I wish there was a fund, I could do that, buy them at cost. But I can't. You have to buy them.
Yeah.
Now, one of the books that you've written, which again it's a dozen at this point. You've literally written 12 books on this subject, right, John? I mean, that's incredible, man.
Said something.
Well, one of those, again, I told you we were going to be critical. One of those is how to defend the Christian faith, advice from an atheist. Now, why are you giving ammunition to the other team, John? Can explain what the purpose of this book is? Because I love this idea.
Anthropology professor and a good friend of mine, David Eller, says, I am loath to give them any help.
Yeah.
There you go.
Come on, man.
Well, I need a few extra books. I need a few extra bucks in my pocket. So, whatever. No, what I did, I wish I had that copy right here. What I decided to do is offer some snarky advice, some sarcastic advice, and some honest advice about how apologists actually do their task. And my first chapter says the first thing you ought to study out, and that is why you're wanting to be an apologist in the first place.
Yeah,
exactly. How to be an apologist. First, why would we need this thing called apologists? Why don't you study some subject or another subject and be an expert in that? But no, to study apologists and how they work is mainly to say, I already know what's right before I start studying. So I offer some other advice, like get a good education at a good school. And not the ones that require you to sign on the dotted line a creedal faith statement. They're not really interested. Right. And if they fire professors, and they do, for violating the creedal statement, well, that's not in the honest interest of truth. You see, so I talk about that, and I said, be careful of which religion you actually want to defend, and I talk about how you can know which religion is true, if there is one. So things like that. And what my whole book is about is this. I'm going to tell you how apologists work, and they're not doing a very good job so far.
Right.
Basically, all apologists is special pleading.
It is.
Yeah.
Begging the question and other things. And I reveal that in the book, and I say, if you want to be an apologist, don't do that.
Yeah, it's basically things not to do. Essentially, is what your book really is.
But then I go on to say, oh wait, but if you didn't do that, you wouldn't be an apologist at all, now would you? So it's like trying to warn them against even going into apologetic work.
Apologetics, right? Yeah. Well, we got a couple of super chats and a question in the chat. Kim Possible, there she is with that every week, that Antichrist 666 super chat. So John, I have to tell every guest that once that goes on the screen, we're all going to hell. So that's just how 666 works.
I thought I was still hanging on just a little bit to the pearly gates, but all right. Well,
you shouldn't have been on here when that. See, it's some kind of a thing that happens in the spiritual realm. Once that goes up on the screen, whoever's on the screen at that time is now doomed to go to hell. I don't know. I don't make the rules. I'm just interpreting here.
Makes just as much sense as communion. So
it does.
There's so many different groups in there. There's so many different hells.
That's
which one are you going to? I mean, like,
yeah,
if you don't go to Christian hell, you go to Allah's hell.
I'm gonna do like I used to do on downtown Broadway in Nashville. Just walk down the street and hear all the music coming out of the bars, and then go into the one that has the best music. So that's what I'm gonna do in hell.
I like that. Yeah. Just gotta check them all out.
I like good music. Yeah.
And we got a couple questions. Well, from Charlene McConnell. Do most people deconvert when they are young? I didn't. Obviously, I waited for the bulk of my life to deconstruct. And then more specifically to you, I think, John, what made you question religion? So we heard that you went to your Bible school and got your degrees and then started pastoring. Then what happened? I mean, how'd you go off the rails?
Sin.
Sin?
Sin.
Yeah.
Really, I went to Great Lakes Christian College, and when I told them I was going to go to Lincoln Christian Seminary, they said the liberals are there. You shouldn't go. But I went anyway. And they're not liberal. They're conservative as all get out. And then when I wanted to go to Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, they said, don't go there. The liberals are there for sure.
The liberals.
The liberals are, very relative, right? And so then when I went to Marquette University, they said, watch out, the liberals are there. And I found them. They really were there. But when I was there, it was interesting. I learned a lot of people who disagree had very good arguments for disagreeing. And, liberals, the liberals make my case for me. I mean, they really do. All I got to do is understand what they're saying and pass it on. Because and then I offer my own critique of the liberal faith.
Right.
All I can do is do unto them what they've done to others. So they gave me interesting information that came home to roost, and I did. I had trouble with the church. I mean, and a woman, and it wasn't a good thing. And so I just kind of questioned about all things that my life, and I was depressed because I knew my ministry time of life was over, and so I started looking at life and saying, well, was this all a waste? And what am I going to do now? And then I started thinking through about my faith because of the information. I had the information. And so all I did was just start thinking and reading in depth about the kinds of things that I had heard first at Marquette, but just on my own. And I didn't have the internet to work through. It was just all books and essays that I had at the libraries and other places. And the main thing for me, since I was a conservative, was Genesis 1-11, and that was I tried to reconcile that with science because I learned about science and I loved looking at the posters of galaxies and stars and
Mhm.
wondering about them. And I couldn't reconcile that universe with what I found in Genesis 1 to 11. I mean, it's all myth. Well, then what else is myth? You know? And so,
well, when
one
you say
by one,
Genesis 1 through 11, what are you specifically referring to? Where does that
the Adam
take?
and Eve story, the sun, moon, and stars appearing on the fourth day.
Sure.
The fact that there's two different creation accounts. Why would that be? Genesis 1 and then also Genesis 2 through 3. And they said different things. They were from a different perspective, and the firmament, the stars were hung in it, and
Yeah.
it says that God opened the floodgates of water to flood the earth. What the hell are we talking about?
I know.
We're in a snow globe, apparently. That's fun. But
and then the flood, Tower of Babel.
Yeah. Right. That's where languages came from. Now I understand. I mean, that's why they're so far separated all over the globe. So I started looking at those sorts of things, and miracles. It's like this couldn't be, that couldn't be, and there's no evidence for that. Why would I believe it? Just because it says that Balaam's ass talked.
Right.
The thing isn't that Balaam believed it. The thing is that it's in the Bible that someone believed his tale. On what evidence, you see?
But when you were a minister, when you were a believer, those stories didn't bother you, or did you? What do you remember thinking about Genesis 1 through 11 when you'd gone to divinity school and when you were a minister and you were preaching the gospel? How did those things not bother you then?
I mean, that is a really good question, and the only thing I can say is that when your mind is captive of a particular thought or religion or worldview or ideology, you can't see out of it. You just can't. I did, and people do, but you don't look for it. You're certainly not looking for it. And anybody who says otherwise, you think they're weird or of Satan or that I need to convert them. And so it's really a phenomenon that I've been studying ever since, the mind of the believer. I was one. How could I believe this stuff? I think some of it is just, maybe most of it is actually is information. I used to say it's a different perspective. You just need a different perspective. I used to say that all the time. And I've come to the point where now I say it's just simply the lack of information and the lack of willingness to look for that information and the lack of a willingness to follow that information where it goes.
Yeah.
Just ignorance. I mean, I think it comes right down to ignorance and willful ignorance, if you will, but just ignorance. And some people are going to die in it, So
because they won't look at the questions objectively or with a critical mind. Secular, you never bought into it. You kind of stepped out of it at a pretty young age, right?
Yeah, I stepped out. By the time I was 18, I was still going to my church that I had grown up in, but just to play music. I didn't believe anymore. But I wouldn't call myself an atheist for a few years later. But one of the things that I definitely came across when I started stepping into these spaces is actually your baby, John. And I definitely want you to talk about this, because I think this is something that is just so awesome. And again, it's so ubiquitous now, I think, in so many spaces like this, which is the outsider test of faith. For some of the people out there that are hanging with us that aren't familiar with this, again, I imagine probably 90 some odd % of our audience goes, holy crap, I know that. I've used that for years. What the, so can you kind of tell us a little bit about what this is and how this was valuable for you?
Well, I put a name to something people do, I mean, people have done since whenever they've rejected religion, any given religion. And it's just simply to look at their own religion as if they're outsiders to it. Another term could have been used, like look at your faith as if you're a non-believer, as if you're a non-believer. That's synonymous. Agnostic, I use the term. And what does it look like from that perspective?
Yeah.
And I think Julia Sweeney talked about that a little bit in her monologue, Letting Go of God, I think the name of it is.
Yeah.
She said I need to put my, what was it, my God glasses on or something, and she put on, she took them off right off, right, put them on a little longer, took them right off. So that was how that worked.
Yeah.
So where you just actually look around and you ask yourself, what would life be like, and what should I expect if God doesn't exist, or if my faith is wrong, and so it's called the outsider test for faith for that reason. Yeah.
And that again is something that I think is very, very common, found in so many of these spaces, and is something I see in debates on Discords or Twitter or whatever, where somebody will respond to a believer and they'll say, yeah, but think about this as if you were a Hindu, or think about this if you just didn't believe spirits were real. And I love that. It's so cool. I think that's a very valuable tool. And again, it's something that we all do. We just do it without even really thinking about it. Somebody comes up and goes, oh my gosh, I met Bigfoot yesterday. And the first thought you have is like, what? No, you didn't. Like, you know?
That helps people step outside themselves. I talked earlier about, when you're in an ideology or a religion, you can't see anything else. You have to provoke them to look outside that box. And I like what Anthony Magabosco, is that
Magabosco?
Oh yeah.
I love him. I met him. He's a good guy, and he tries to get people to doubt. Just can I get a little doubt here? And that might help open the floodgates, of a reality-based life. And in order to do that, you have to ask them questions outside the box of what they're comfortable with. You got to make them uncomfortable, and those things are all important if you want to. Now, why would I want to change people's minds? Well, I think that Christianity harms people. Right? I just think there's so many different areas. And it has harmed people that I think it's better to not have faith and live a life of reality. So I maintain it. And besides, I like a good challenge. And what better challenge is there but to try to convince somebody they're wrong about something so important?
I know. Yeah, it's pretty challenging. Got a comment from my friend Mason Embry. He's there in Nashville. He's a dear friend of mine. The outsider test of faith was the final nail in the coffin for my belief. It was a long journey in John's book, and that test is what took me over the edge. I know Mason really well. I wish he was able to call in tonight because he would share more about that, but I've known Mason a long time. Mason, yeah.
Mason, you don't know how that makes someone like me feel when that's what I've done for like 20 years now, and is it 20? Yeah, close to. And to know that I've helped to change somebody. I was a part of that. So thank you so much. So encouraging, because it's not like I'm rich.
No,
it
is gratifying, isn't it, John? Because I know that you write that stuff because it's something you firmly believe in. You're not writing it to make money and to get rich. I mean, anybody out there who's an aspiring atheist writer, let's just tell you there's no money in it. So make sure that you've got something else to do.
Yeah, have another skill.
I made I put out a book a year, and I probably at most made about $8,000 a year at the most, and it's been as low as $1,000 a year in the book. So it depends on how long they've been out and things like that. So it's not a lot of money. I mean, it's okay, but it's not a lot of money.
The point is, you're not doing it for the money. You're doing it because you really
not at all. No, but it's nice to have a little bit. But the most important and most rewarding thing is to hear from people like Mason. Because you don't get to hear from them too often until you're on a program like this, or they email you out of the blue, or sometimes someone will say, I've been an avid reader of your blog for like years, and finally what you said hit home, and I no longer believe, or something like that. So it's quite the challenge, and it's quite rewarding, because there's ramifications when a father leaves the faith, or a brother leaves the faith, for others around them. And let's say a brother left the faith. Well, first they try to convince him otherwise, and he might give them a book or an essay or a video and a podcast, and then they have this debate about it. But so there's a widening spreading of the seed, if you will, that might help others along the way.
Sowing the seed, God will give the increase.
I know. I hate using that analogy. The seed, it's in the Bible, isn't it? Oh, I just did it. I didn't mean to.
It's a principle in nature. The Bible has no lock on it. They don't own that shit. I mean,
That's
sowing seeds and getting a harvest is a nature thing, not a God thing. But to Mason's story, if you're watching Mason, I know I know this because we talked so much. But he was raised Pentecostal, and he was a firm believer, and he's a dynamic, incredible piano player. And part of his story is that in the process of his deconstruction, he was also helped leading worship at an evangelical church. And so backstage, when because the evangelical churches, you don't just do a hymn service and then that's it. You're leading people into the presence of God, and then afterwards you got to close the deal. So the worship service prior to the message is just to get people ramped up. Then the message comes, and then the altar call is where the money, that's the money shot. And you've got to be there to drive it home. And so the key to that time in the worship service is the keyboard player, the piano player, because they set the mood and they bring it home, man. You bring that down and you close the deal. So Mason would be backstage waiting on his time to close the deal, and he's reading these kinds of books backstage. So he's reading your book and he's processing his faith while he's doing that. Then finally, like you said, that was the final nail, and you closed the deal for him, John.
That's funny.
Yes, it is. So I know what you mean when you hear from people like that, how gratifying it is. I get that from time to time. I get messages from people, and what's fun and scary is that you do stuff, you write books, you get on shows like this, and you never know who's watching, and it could be anyone. And so over the last few years, I've heard from people in previous churches, for good and bad. Some get on, they'll send me a message and they're scolding me and telling me how bad I am and that God's going to judge me and, that kind of stuff. But more often than not, it's people that reach out and they say, I heard you on some show, or I found your book and I read it, and it just really helped me process my own deconstruction and help me understand. Because what you've found too, John, I'm sure, is that people are going through this deconstruction process and they don't know how to make sense of it. There's no guidebook for this. There's no instruction manual. If you get on the end, you can't Google, how do I deconstruct my faith? I mean, you can, but you'll probably just get a bunch of books and shit. So you still have to navigate it individually. It's a personal journey, and everyone's journey is different. Wouldn't you say that's what you've learned or discovered from people, John?
I sure have. I've heard from a lot of different people, and there's different issues that matter to different people. There's different levels of like some it's instant, others it's like gradual, and the time of how gradual it is different. So a lot of differences about how they leave, and really how committed they were to begin with. Well, I just went to church here and there.
Exactly.
Like me, I just dove off.
But for the people who were truly invested, like you and I were, John, like you said earlier, I didn't understand the people that proclaimed a faith in Jesus and then just kind of took it casually. Because for me, I was all in, and I got caught up in it like you did. The Jesus movement, the excitement of something going on. I was swept up in it, a radical conversion experience. And it was everything. It was everything for me. I didn't take it casually, and I didn't understand people that did take it casually. And for those of us that were that deep in it, to unwind that, to disentangle that, takes a lot more effort, and it costs us a lot more emotionally.
Well, we know more about the Christian faith as a result when we leave it, because if you think that if you get this wrong, you're going to go to hell.
Right.
then you better well sure get this right. You know?
Big stakes.
So you study it out. You go down every angle that you can go down, and you try to solve every intellectual problem and emotional problem you can before you say, you know what, it doesn't. It's not true. It's and I'm going to leave it. You know, it's a painful thing. It's like leaving your family. It's like it's a very painful. Everything you've ever done, at least is in your recent memory, I guess. You know, it depends on things. Is wrong. You know, it's tough to say no.
It does, yeah. And how old were you when you came to the conclusion that you didn't believe anymore?
Well, the year 2005. I remember I was on an online. Well, that makes me old.
Yeah, me too.
I'd have to say it'd be 45, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, a little younger than me. See, I stayed in it longer. I was in my mid 50s when I questioned and came out of it. So a good 3.5 decades, it kept me entangled. I want to get to this super chat here from Lilypad LA. Thank you so much for your $99.99. I appreciate that support. Read that, Elliot. My voice is getting hoarse. Can you read the super chat question to John?
Says, hey, John, thank you for your leading presence in the atheism community. So many people look up to you on their deconversion/deconstruction paths. And I'm curious if you had anyone you really looked up to in similar fashion when you were starting your journey. Was there anybody that made a big impact on you in your time?
First off, thank you, for saying that. I don't know. You know what? I don't always. I do a lot of writing on my blog, and I don't know who's reading. And, I don't know who looks up to me, who doesn't, and that's not what I do. But thank you for that. But at the time, there were like Carl Sagan and his book, The Demon Haunted World. I say they're books, not radio programs necessarily. And Michael Shermer and his books were influential to me as well. And there were some religious ones by Klaus Westermann. And you're just testing my memory, but
that's what it was.
There's Henry Blocker, called In the Beginning. He looked at the first chapters of Genesis. But I was a solitary person wrestling with my doubts and my books, and I really wasn't online. There's stages, okay? So 1992 through 1996 or 7, I was going through these issues and questions and doubt while I was teaching at Great Lakes Christian College classes on apologetics and theology. Right. And I also taught a Sunday school class. But you don't know you're going to leave the faith while you're studying it out. But you have all kinds of these doubts, that you're trying to wrestle with, and all of a sudden you wake up one day and I no longer believe. Now that happened about 1998. I didn't believe in Christianity, but I didn't become an atheist. I didn't say there is no God. I don't think this probability is below the threshold of there being no God until 2005. So in 1998, I said no to the Christian God and the Bible and things like that. But and there's a lot of different influences. It's just I don't remember all of them. But they probably wouldn't be like you want me to mention Isaac Asimov, or any other things. No, there was mainly liberal literature. Right. Mainly liberal and scholarly liberal material. Bernard Anderson's book on the Old Testament. I don't understand why, as I look back, that they could say the kinds of things they say about the Old Testament and still believe. But he's one. And Howard Van Til, he has a book called the Fourth Day. The focus on the fourth day in the creation accounts was crucial, because how could you have the sun, moon, and stars thrust out into the sky when when they are already there before the Earth came into existence?
Kind of important, yeah.
And now today, believers will say, conservatives will say, well, you shouldn't have taken that literally to begin with.
Right.
You're an ignoramus to leave the faith for that. Well, that wasn't just it. I came to the idea that there's no evidence for miracles, at all, in the Bible. And so that's more important than just saying, well, you came away believing differently because you had a false view of the Bible to begin with, and which, is true, I guess I'd have to say. But the point is, I started questioning the whole Bible because of that. What if it's all myth? What if it's all fantasy?
Yeah.
And just because that might be the starting point doesn't mean that the process in the end wasn't also correct, which it was. There's just no evidence for that. No objective evidence for any of the miracles in the Bible. Any of them, I'll say it, any of them. None. No, not even a little bit. There might be some anecdotal testimony, which you shouldn't discount, but it's always second, third, fourth hand.
What about the chariot wheels in the Dead Sea or whatever? I'm just kidding. No,
I saw some. I think those are fabricated, actually. Yeah, but I don't. There's all kinds of other reasons not to believe the Exodus story than just that. Right. I mean, how many were there? Like 6 million people, and their sandals never wore out, and they were fed manna from the sky, the burning in the bush. Am I supposed to believe that Moses got his directives from a burning bush? Never came out. No. Well, there's no evidence for it. He just come down and say, I got these tablets here, and by the way, I'm going to break them and make a new set, and you're going to obey me because, I don't know, there's a lightning storm here or something. I don't know. It's just...
And got lost for decades in the wilderness that truly is not very large at all when you think about it. You look at it on a map and you're like, how could you get lost here for 40 years, bro?
Yeah,
eventually you would find your way.
I could have traversed that in 15 days.
Yeah, right.
Archaeologists say, like Israel Finkelstein, he says that we can find the ruins of a nomad campsite from a century or two ago, or even a millennial or so, and just a campsite. There's trinkets and things like that are left over, and he says if there were 6 million people traveling around the Sinai, we should find something there, but they find nothing at all. In fact, they know what it says in the Bible, what cities they went to, and so they have a rough idea where they are, and they dig and they don't find anything. I mean, you can only say, well, you just haven't looked in the right place only so long before you say, well, there's in the right place.
No.
So it sounds like the scientific disconnect with the Bible narrative was a big part of your. You began to have big problems with that.
Well,
yeah.
Imagine, if you will, the creator of the universe not knowing how the universe operates.
Yeah.
Good point.
Really, seriously, and supposedly knowing in advance that science is going to arise, and this thing called science is going to undercut, the Bible, and why I didn't reveal it. But I still am not going to reveal it. I mean, there's so many stupid things that this God supposedly did.
What are the basic Christian arguments you've heard to get around those kind of things? The scientific.
Well. I don't like playing the devil's advocate to the devil I don't believe in, and he can advocate for himself. I mean, they'll say that, like for instance, okay, let me take a non-scientific thing: slavery. It's wrong.
Right.
Well, why didn't God? I say, well, why didn't God say something civilized, for instance, about that sort of stuff? And they will say, well, what do you expect him to do? If he said otherwise, then people wouldn't believe him because they had that moral, or they had that idea that it's okay. I mean, he would be going against their scruples, if you will.
Yeah.
And science itself. If God said, well, the sun doesn't go around the earth spins and goes around the sun, it would go against what they know for sure is true. And so therefore he couldn't have told them the truth about these sorts of things, either slavery, the moral concern, or the universe, because then they would laugh at his idea. Well, they don't really understand that. Okay, they really don't understand what God could have done. I mean, it says that he at one time he says, I'm going to destroy all the Israelites until you learn to obey me. I mean, he could have done something like that. Say, no, I don't care what you've been told. Wham, what I'm saying is true. Or maybe tell them how to figure it out. Well, here's a telescope. Why don't you go figure it out? Why don't you go look at the sunspots, discover for yourself that, this is how the planets revolve, and just simply say, you shall not have slaves, and nor shall you beat them, and if you do, I'm going to kick your asses.
That's true. That's simple. It's that simple. But they call it indentured servitude, and they throw back on things like that. It wasn't really slavery, and you don't understand. It's a different kind of thing back then. No, it's not. So stop.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it truly, all those things. Look, God, if he existed, could have said, democracy is the way. It's the way I want you to do. I want you to agree. And I want you to have a secular based society, because any God, we can't go by what God says, even if it's me. You got to figure it out for yourself. Of course, then he puts himself out of a job.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Woohoo! That'd be one way to do it. He could have instituted democracy instead of a theocracy, and say, you figure it out yourselves. You're supposed to be. You can work it out. And then give us some kind of moral sense in our heads that is accurate and not inaccurate. All that stuff.
Well, referencing the book Miracles, you just mentioned No Miracles. In your book, The Case Against Miracles. Yeah, that book right there.
That one. Just checking.
What's give us the what's your main argument against miracles? Because there also are people who not only point to the miracles of the Bible, but their own experiences with miracles. How do you respond to that?
Yeah. Now, okay. The reason why believers in holy books written in the ancient world will believe in modern day miracles is because they believe in the miracles in an ancient book that they can't check out.
It opens their mind toward the possibility of it.
They are strongly inclined to think that a miracle took place because they believe in a God who did, turned a hand leprous and then all of a sudden fixed him. And so that happened because it's right there in the Bible. Well, what else is God doing? And he certainly hasn't changed, because we have this Bible passage that says Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So therefore, he must still be doing something like that somewhere. So they're inclined to believe a lot of different tales. Now, I've seen that personally, because I had been a Pentecostal Christian for a time before my college training steered me away. This is how indoctrination works. You go with what somebody tells you because you trust them. And so they would believe in miracles. Now, here's what I'm saying about the modern miracles. First, we've got Joe Nickell. I don't know if you've ever talked to him or heard of him, but he's the only full-time paranormal detective. He used to work for CFI. He might still work for CFI, but he's written some books. Joe Nickell. He wrote a chapter for one of my books on the Shroud of Turin.
Okay.
But what I would do, of course, I'd point to James Randi and others who are experts in debunking miraculous claims. Darren Brown is another one. You got to know these people. Yeah. Harriet, what's her name? Harriet Hall. She wrote a chapter for my book. I think it's in the Miracles book. And they show how it's much like magicians, or it's sleight of hand, or sometimes it's just the odds. Now, the odds, that's a really crucial argument when it comes to miracles. I mean, the odds are that every one of us is going to experience something like a miracle every month, at least once a month. I mean, a miracle, now miracles by definition in that term would be something good happening to you rather than something bad. You know, all of a sudden $1 million lands in your head and you're laughing. That's like nothing.
Something unusual that you can't explain is what you're saying. Right.
Right. Now, we know for a matter of fact that's going to happen, given the odds, to 8 billion people now on Earth. It's going to happen to each one of us every month. I mean, something really astronomically outlandish is going to happen. So if someone says, like, for instance, I had this illness and the doctors said you had a 1 in a million chance that you could be healed, and you get healed, what's happened? See, what's happened, right? We already know. It's a 1 in a million chance, right? If he's accurate. So then that's going to happen to everyone once a month. And it doesn't really sit well with people who believe, no, I know because my God, my Bible or the Quran can do those kinds of things. But the fact is, it's simply going with the odds. It's going to happen. And you can't explain it. It's really astounding. But until you can show me that the miracle not had more than just, I mean, I don't even know what would have to happen. I mean, maybe watching a foot regrow, a leg, or just watching it. Whoa! I might stop and think to myself, well, maybe there's some kind of scientific explanation. And why wouldn't I? But still,
yeah, you'd want to understand what I mean. It reminds me of that website I found in my searching days back then too. Why doesn't God heal amputees?
Right.
That kind of thing. Yeah, he heals a lot of headaches and backaches, but no amputees.
Now there are some animals that can regrow a limb, like a starfish can regrow one of its limbs.
Octopus, right?
An octopus can. So why couldn't God have done that with us? Maybe there's something in our DNA that might make it happen. I don't know, but there's nothing wrong with looking for a scientific explanation, because those are the things that has produced the modern world that we have.
Exactly. But when you're predisposed, like you said, when you're predisposed to believe that you serve a God who's in the miracle business, then your first instinct when something unusual happens is to, now I remember living in that world where if something unusual happens, if it's good, it was God. If it's bad, it was Satan.
Yeah. Or I did something and I deserved the punishment that God was giving. Oh yeah.
But as someone living with a terminal disease, ALS, I've gotten a lot of feedback from people in all kinds of different things and all kinds of different ways. But when I get Christians telling me that they're praying for me, for God to heal me from my ALS, my pushback is along the lines of this. Number one, 100% of the people who've gotten diagnosed with ALS have died from ALS or at their own hand prior to it. It's 100% fatal, 100%. And no one's ever been healed from it. In other words, got it and then doesn't have it anymore, and God took it away and they're fine. That's not a thing. The other part of that answer I give is that if God did heal me of that, the one person of all the people, he would have some explaining to do.
God would have some explaining to do.
Yeah. Why didn't he heal the others? Why am I?
Right.
Especially an atheist. Now they would say, well, God wanted to prove himself to you. But I know Christians who've gotten ALS and died from it. My partner's cousin. We just lost another friend last week that we knew from ALS. Why would God choose me? And to the Christians who claim that God did a certain miracle for them, my pushback to them, rather than say, no, he didn't. Well, I'll say that too. But, like you said, John, there's no evidence to suggest that a God did this. my pushback more and more is, why would God be that special to you? Why are you that special? I mean, what about the parents who are at the children's hospital in Memphis who lose their children to brain cancer and leukemia, and they've been praying their guts out to save their 2-year-old baby, and God didn't see fit to answer that prayer? Why would God be so inclined to do a special thing for you, you narcissistic, egotistical son of a bitch? Right? Am I right?
Yeah. And the little things too, the little tiny pains in the asses, you know, where it's really late at night and you're just getting up to go to the bathroom real quick and you just kick something really hard and it's like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. Why would God allow that? Like, why would you allow for there to be a thumbtack here that I'm going to step on in 10 minutes, you know? But yeah, on top of those little terrible things, how do you justify genocide? How does God justify doing nothing throughout all of this? And that's why I've always thought that the argument of evil, right, is really a powerful argument against
what's
a good
that
God.
book again?
What's that book? There we go. There we go. We are not shy about shilling, which, by the way, you can find all those links in the chat and the description, folks. So go there and buy those books. But
I make an argument in that book on the horrendous suffering that see, we had this Indonesian tsunami that wiped out 250,000 people in 2004, I think it was.
Right.
And a lot of these people died because they drank the water afterward. You know, I don't know how many. I mean, I'm not saying, you know, a lot. So it got compounded, you know. Of course, God could have said, well, don't drink the water, don't drink polluted water. I mean, a simple thing like that. No, I overlooked it, right?
Helped us with germ theory.
Exactly.
Would have been nice.
But if God could have, here's what I say. Now, that was because of an underwater earthquake. That's what caused the big waves. So God, knowing that this is going to happen, if he's all-knowing, he could have not allowed the underwater earthquake to kill those people, you see. And how would he do that? With a miracle. Sorry. I'm being a little foolish right now.
I love it.
He could have done that with a miracle. Well, then they say, well, wait a minute now. According to the best of science, there's plate tectonics, and they're going to, you know, move and eventually anyway. And so, how can God, if he's going to have a natural world, continually intervene with miracles? Well, is God lazy? Is he lazy? I'm sorry, this is just one too many. No, he's omnipotent, right? Is he lazy somehow? So I introduced the idea, at least I'm not pretty sure other people think things before I do, but I said, why doesn't God do a perpetual miracle? I mean, after all, isn't God capable of a perpetual miracle? And what's that mean? Well, stop the underwater earthquake and then perform a perpetual miracle that it never takes place in the future either, you know? And I mean, and then I say, is God lazy or something? But because those kind of events happen, then I make the argument that there really isn't a God. I mean, there really isn't a good God who has all power and all knowledge, because if he doesn't do anything with the most egregious problems, you know, horrendous suffering, then he couldn't do a damn thing about that tack that you stepped on in the middle of the night either. I mean, so if he allows those to happen, he's done as far as belief goes.
Yeah.
But
yes, go ahead.
When God created, here's the argument I've heard, and I want you to speak to this, John, because I know you've heard variations of this. Here's the argument I've heard. When God created all things perfect in the Garden of Eden, back in that special, wonderful day. But then, dadgummit, Satan came in there and made things bad, and the fall of man, and God just obviously couldn't prevent that because free will. But the fall of man contaminated the earth, and sin came on the scene, sin and death and darkness and evil and horrendous suffering, like you just mentioned in your book, John. It was because man didn't do it, women did, so it's their fault.
That's right. It's a men-centered religion, isn't it?
Thank goodness. Oh.
I know, right? Three men here can
yeah.
throw the women under the bus right now.
Genevieve, I am so sorry. I just want to say
Genevieve's not here. Let's just bash all these.
You didn't write that book, okay?
So we didn't write it. Hey, I didn't write the Bible. Blame it on Eve. Eve was framed. My good friend Eve was framed. We'd have something to say about that. But that's the story. That's the rebuttal to this problem of evil. Is that it was perfect in the beginning, but because man sinned, evil came into the world, and here we are with tsunamis 2,000 years later. How do you speak to that, John?
There's so many things to say in response. I don't know. I think I could number them, but one that tale is borrowed from Mesopotamian religions and stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Right.
It was an earlier story that they decided to use the words Noah and Adam and Eve, which were symbols for Adam was a symbol for man and not a real name, and Eve was for life or something like that. But also evolution destroys the whole idea. I mean, like you ignorant about science?
That's why evolution's evil. Well, that's why the conservative Christians fight evolution so hard. Because if evolution's real, then Adam and Eve can't be real.
You expect me to convince people of something here on the spot?
Yeah, I absolutely do.
I can't say, I don't have magic words. Quit asking me to have them. Studying books and Richard Dawkins, The Greatest Show on Earth. I mean, here's what I try to do with people is say enough that they might consider doing deeper research.
Absolutely.
Right. Just deeper research. Yeah. But the third thing I'd say about Adam and Eve is that either God would knew that they were going to sin, or he didn't. And if he did, then it was entrapment. I mean, you can't do anything else. I mean, I've built you in such a way that curiosity is going to kill that cat, and you're going to sin, and or not. Now, if let me see if I get this right, because I got to remember this. If you give somebody a test after college and they all fail, right? It's not a fair test,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
unless the test was fair, someone would have had to pass it. That means there's people alive today who, if they were under the same, if you go with it, there are people alive today who would not have sinned in the garden if they were there. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been a fair test, which means they're being punished for something they never would have done.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to talk about consistency, that's just illogical. But if everybody were to pass the test, then I'm down with that.
Yeah, it was rigged. It was rigged from the beginning, obviously. Yeah. So you're right. It was a setup. But
so Gilgamesh, the evolution, and the whole story itself. Now there's Satan. There's Satan there. It's a mythological beast. But let's say that's, by the way, if you study the Genesis, the Satan was not in the serpent. It was actually the serpent. We don't get that connection until we read the last book of the Bible in Revelation, where they connect the serpent in Genesis and the devil. I think that's how that works. So the Satan, he either rebelled against God and knew he was going to be utterly destroyed somehow, which means he's suicidal or dumber than a box of rocks.
Yeah.
But certainly, how could God have created a being like that, with that kind of like inclination in the first place? The whole story just reeks of myth. It makes no sense at all, and it's contrary to science. Now, how's that? Now, you ask me, convince somebody of that. No, I'm just throwing the seeds out there.
No, I know you're just Johnny Appleseed, just planting the seeds. And
by the way, Johnny Appleseed's buried in Fort Wayne. That's where I live.
I heard that.
Got a little grave site there.
Pretty
But
cool.
that's exactly it, John. You're basically trying to get people to think through things. I mean, most Christians don't even know there was a Gilgamesh story. I never did. And people, when you're conditioned to believe the stories in the Bible are true and the Bible's inerrant and it's the word of God and all that is fit together by God with this big plan, then you don't question how these things make sense. Because another big argument with Adam and Eve and the problem of evil is free will, that God gave Adam and Eve free will to choose to eat the fruit or not. Well, why did he have to do that?
He
I
did.
mean, he made the world. He could have made the world with any rules he wanted to, and yet he put free will, this myth of free will. And then if that's true, are we going to have free will in heaven?
Oh,
Because,
yeah.
Because Lucifer obviously did. So what happens if someone else starts the whole fucking thing over again?
Have you ever read my books, or have I been plagiarizing for you? I forget about that.
One or the other. I don't know.
Free will. We as humans don't value free will when it comes to people who torture and dismember others. What do we do with them? Well, I'm not going to defend capital punishment, but I'm going to say we put them away. We sequester them. We take them and we put them in jails and prisons, and hopefully they're humanely kept. Myself, I don't think we should people are sick or they're just socially inept or something like that. But get them out of the society. But no, God says to Satan, go ahead and work your magic on the earth for like centuries upon centuries, and then even more millennia, and then someday in the end I'll just snuff your life out. But go ahead, have your day. We don't do that to criminals.
No, we don't. Right. We don't. And that it's inhumane. It's cruel. If you look at the suffering that mankind has experienced through the centuries, I mean, just go to the Holocaust. Start and stop right there. Yeah. Just that in itself is enough. But God had to give him free will because that's how the game's played. And, sucks. But, what am I going to do? I'm just God.
That's crazy. It's just crazy. We never give our children razor blades and say, here, little Johnny or Susie, here's a razor blade. Have fun with it. And they cut themselves all up with it because, they're, to say, young and don't know beans. Yeah. We don't do that. We wait until they're mature enough to handle that. Now, I would think that at some point, when it comes to free will, God, being a good God, if he exists, if he doesn't, he should only give us enough free will that we can handle. I mean, what's wrong with saying, I'm not going to give you this amount of free will yet because you're a bastard?
Yeah, I know, right? You can't handle it.
A lot more loving, to be honest. I mean,
there's a super chat from Aaron Coulson. Ethan, can you grab? I mean, Ethan, but Elliot, can you grab that?
Yeah. From Aaron Colson, it says, Dave and John, what's the best way for us to support you? PayPal, Patreon, buy your book, something else. And then also, I'm jealous of Elliot's hair. Well, thank you. It was a miracle that gave me this. I'm just kidding. But yeah, best way to support you both.
Go ahead, Dave. This is good.
Well, it's my stuff's all on the show. You can support me on probably Patreon is probably the best. As we talked earlier, our books don't make us a lot of money, but I'd love for you to read my book if you haven't. But if you want to become a Patreon supporter, the links to that are in the show notes and in the chat, and we'd appreciate that if you appreciate what we do. But John, how can we support you, brother?
On my website, Debunking Christianity, there's a place in the sidebar, and it says how to support me. And you can donate through PayPal if you want. You can send anything from $1,000 or $10,000. I'm good. I'm down with that. or $5. It doesn't matter. But I appreciate that. Thank you. Buy my books. They're go on Amazon. It's a good place as any to get them. Look for my name, John W. Loftus, and buy several copies. Give to all your friends.
Nice.
John has enough books, just so everybody's aware. John has enough books that either you could read a brand new book from him every month for a full year, or read one of his books every year for the next decade. So it's your choice, honestly. There's a lot. So,
or if you're like Jesus and have 12 disciples, you can give one to each disciple.
Well, actually, I've got the 13th disciple. It just came out.
Oh, what is that?
Well, Jonathan Pierce. I don't know if you know him.
Yeah.
Good guy. If you don't, you interview him. He has published a book of debates and things like that of mine.
Okay.
I didn't write really any new material for it, but those are debate openers and some things that people hadn't. I mean, they're never before published material. But
wow.
Yeah.
And you've got one of your books is you co-wrote with Randall Rouser, a fairly well-known Christian apologist, and it's you guys going kind of back and forth on it.
Yeah, I trashed him.
Oh yeah,
it was a smackdown.
I can say that because even though it's a bit over the top to say that, I know, but a lot of people say that, and you'd have to read the book to see how. I remember while we were co-writing that book, I was thinking to myself, wow, is that the best he's got? And we go back and forth on an issue, and then we offer a rebuttal to his rebuttal, and on. And even my writing style is much better than his, because he'll take a whole paragraph to tell a story. I'm not a storyteller, and sorry to let anybody down, but I have factual arguments, and they make sense. They flow together, but it's just I don't take a lot of time to write a story about somebody and make a point.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking to myself, boy, I'm trashing him on most every issue. And some people on Amazon said that John only lost maybe one or two issues, and I'm not expecting perfect thing, but it was a bad book for him, and so he started revisiting that book. I like him. I'm not trying to trash him here. I'm not trying to trash him as a person,
right?
Just his ideas.
But he started writing about each one of those chapters that we wrote. It's 20 debatable questions in that book, God or Godless. And so then he started revisiting them on his blog. Well, let me say this about chapter 1, and then he starts chapter 2, and I got news of this, and then on the 5th chapter I said, I wrote something on my blog. I said, he didn't do this. Is proof he didn't do well in the book, because he's got to revisit it, and he stopped writing them.
Oh God, that's funny.
I didn't mean to send him down, but maybe he just got bored with the whole process anyway. I don't know.
We got a question from Zap Brannigan in the chat. Can you grab that, Elliot?
Yeah. So even Bible scholars have come to admit most stories are allegory and myth, even the core ones right wings still cling to. How do we get them to accept that, at least?
What do you think about that, John?
How do we get the?
So it sounds like. Yeah, it sounds like what Zap was saying was that the vast majority of the Christian scholars, the believers,
Bible scholars, right,
they're still in this boat of saying, hey, a lot of this is allegory and myth, but there is this hardcore group of fundamentalists that still cling on to this. How do we get those fundamentalists to kind of accept that biblical scholarship?
I think that I want to get the fundamentalists to read the liberals. I mean, I just really do. I just want to have them be acquainted with what's going on in biblical scholarship. And it is liberal, and it does undercut the authority of the Bible. And it does make fundamentalists, if somebody's going to make them into moderates and / liberals, the liberals are going to do that. The liberal scholars, they know what they're talking about. And I would recommend them highly. So how do we get them to change? They probably won't change because of me. You're an atheist. You're a God hater. I don't believe a damn thing you're going to tell me. But they might read somebody who's just a little bit farther to the left, than they are, and then a little bit farther to the left. I mean, it might be a process. It was with me. I started reading, moderate literature. I mean, I went to Marquette University, where I met the liberals, and we read the liberal books. But just a little bit farther left and a little bit farther left. There might be more comfortable with doing that than all of a sudden, here's John Loftus and he hates God. You know, how can I? So, but I try to be nice in my books. You know, I mean, like for the most part, I started out being really nice, and maybe a couple of them I haven't been as nice, but.
Well, that's a good point, because I think that there's now the hardcore far right fundamentalists who believe that every word of the Bible is literally true. I'm not sure they're going to even read the liberals, but those who have a little bit of curiosity in them. I know, looking back, there were many years where I pretty much dismissed the liberal Bible scholars because I felt like there's enough verses in the Bible to indicate that only those who have the power of the Holy Spirit can even understand what it's saying. And they just didn't have ears to hear. And so I just put them in the category of people who didn't really understand what the Bible meant. But there are those who, obviously, as I went through the years and got later in life and started questioning some things sincerely, then I was open to more of there were a couple of liberal people who called themselves Christians that I read, and it opened my eyes to another point of view. And once you can begin to at least open the door a crack, then you can let some other ideas in. But there are going to be a number of people who are so locked into their ideology, they need it to be true so badly that they can't even entertain anything that was different. We're running out of time. I got one more super chat I want to get, because it's a question for you, John, from Aunt Kathy. Hey, Aunt Kathy, how you doing? $4.99. Thank you. I also grew up in Fort Wayne. Curious what school John graduated from, and is he familiar with the Adam Apple from 1970 to 1980? What is that?
Kathy, yes and yes. I was. I went to St. Jude's Catholic Church, St. Charles Catholic Church, and then I went to Glenwood Elementary School, then Lane Junior High School, then Snyder. Now you know me. I went to the Adam's Apple. And
what was that? What was Adam's Apple?
It was a really cool Christian youth ministry run by John Lloyd, and Nancy Honeytree would come and sing there, and Petra and Chuck Gerard. And we loved it. We were hippies, and it was really formative in my early beginning. They're very. I remember the one incident. One girl, I wish I knew who she was. She claimed that she got healed, and I said, "Well, that's really nice, a really miracle." And she said she had epilepsy.
Yeah,
I'm healed. And I said, well, that's really cool. She says, but the symptoms remain.
Like the seizures?
Yes.
You're healed, but I still have symptoms.
That was somebody in Adam's Apple.
Isn't that convenient?
A delightful girl. I mean, but I remember. Oh yeah, you're healed. Yeah, I remember my jaw was dropping. You got healed. Woohoo! But my symptoms are still there. I've got to fight those. You know. To silence me. I remember at the time.
Yeah.
I walked away thinking, wait a minute. How could you be healed? Right, if you had the symptoms.
But there was language like that. I remember, you're healed, but the full manifestation will come over time if you continue in your faith. So there's an escape clause, whereas you're healed. God healed you tonight, but those symptoms are only going to diminish over time if you stay faithful. So therefore, it's back on you as the believer. If your full manifestation of your healing doesn't come, it's because you blew it.
Right.
That's it. God gets off scot-free.
No, Kathy, I still live in Fort Wayne, just so you know.
And John,
I moved away. I'm back. I'm back.
So where do we find your blog? The other stuff. What else are you doing? How can people follow you? Keep up with your work. What do we do? How do we find you?
All right, here's what I want everybody listening to do, please. All right. I have a blog. It's called Debunking Christianity. Type it in, and you should find me. John Loftus, Debunking Christianity. Now, I know it's harsh. It's a harsh term. It scares people away. Maybe I shouldn't have named it like that, but it's stuck now. So find it and then follow me. There's a little click of following me. You'll get an email every time something is posted there. Dr. David Madison writes with me and others, and he's written a book, 10 Tough Problems. I'm sorry, I was trying to remember the real fine print. Things that he's really awesome. He has a degree from Boston University, got a doctorate, and he's just an amazing person. He's indefatigable and smart and a very good writer. So you subscribe to that blog. And I want you to also go to Facebook and look me up at John W. Loftus and follow me. Just follow me. I don't have a lot of room for friend requests, and I don't have a special page. Follow me, and please do that. And then whenever you find something that I write or David writes or others write that you think is pretty cool, share it. Please just share it. I don't have the audience I think I should have, and I don't know why.
I agree with that, John. I'm glad you said that, because I think your stuff is great, and I'm wondering, why doesn't this guy have a bigger audience? I 100% agree with that. So
thank you.
I want everyone to do. Elliot, you put that in the chat.
Yeah, there's no excuse for any of the viewers here anymore. You have to do it because the links are all there. So there's no excuse anymore. So
yeah, and so absolutely follow this guy, read his books. It'll help you in your conversations, really, with your with your Christian friends, your family members. John will give you some tools in your dialogue with these people that, we all have them. I've got them. I've got family members, friends who just keep believing, and they don't understand me, and there's broken communication, there's broken relationship. And these are tools that you can have in your arsenal to help you navigate those relationships.
Now, if you go to the page after listening to this program, on the front page of Debunking Christianity, there's an essay I wrote called "How to Change the Minds of Believers." We had talked about that.
Awesome.
So, I think what I said is good, and if you don't agree, comment. Say, I don't think this will work. Somebody said they didn't think it would work, but that's okay. They disagree. But if you want to read that, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, everybody's going to do that, and follow John. And John, I'm hoping that I get to see you at a conference. I'm sure. I know I'm coming to the one in Fort Wayne. I'll be the one in Nashville. And we will hook up. We'll have a drink. We'll have a coffee. We'll catch up. More time than we had last time. So
good.
And thanks for everyone. Thank you, Elliot, for pitching in tonight. And thank you for the super chats, for the followers, for the viewers. We really love being able to do this and be with you every Monday night. So thank you for that. Yeah. And that's it. That's our show for tonight. Mm-hmm.